Has true love ever defied more expectations? Has a secret vow ever shaken kingdoms to their very foundations? From the 12th century to the 16th century, medieval history is filled with tales of forbidden hearts and desperate dashes. Number 7. Mary, Queen of Scots, and James Hepburn, 4th Earl of Bothwell. The year was 1567, and Scotland was a land of political turmoil, religious strife, and whispers of murder. At the heart of it all stood Mary, Queen of Scots, a young monarch already twice a widow and facing unprecedented challenges to her throne. Her first marriage, a brief union to the young King Francis II of France, had ended with his untimely death. Her second, to her cousin, Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, was a disaster from nearly the start. Darnley was ambitious, jealous, and deeply unpopular with the Scottish nobility. He had even been involved in the brutal murder of Mary's private secretary, David Rizzio, right in front of her pregnant self, a moment that forever poisoned their already fragile bond. The Scottish court was a viper's nest of shifting loyalties and deadly plots, and Mary, surrounded by powerful, often ruthless men, struggled to maintain control. Then came the night of February 10th, 1567. A massive explosion ripped through Kirklefield, a house just outside Edinburgh where Lord Darnley was recuperating from illness. Darnley and his servant were found dead in the garden, apparently strangled, having escaped the blast only to meet a more gruesome end. The immediate outcry was deafening. Fingers instantly pointed at James Hepburn, the 4th Earl of Bothwell. Bothwell was a powerful, ambitious nobleman, a border lord known for his martial prowess and his unyielding loyalty to Mary, unlike many other shifting members of her court. He had grown increasingly close to the Queen in the months leading up to Darnley's murder, raising eyebrows and fueling speculation among the Scottish lords and foreign ambassadors. The idea that Bothwell, a man who had served Mary with fierce dedication, could be behind such a heinous act was shocking. Yet the evidence, or at least the popular sentiment, seemed to pile up against him. The kingdom demanded justice. Bothwell was put on trial, but the proceedings were a sham in the eyes of many. He arrived with a formidable retinue of armed men, effectively intimidating his accusers, who failed to appear. Bothwell was swiftly acquitted, a verdict that did little to quell the suspicions swirling around him, and, by extension, the political climate became even more unstable. Mary desperately needed to shore up her authority, to find a way to silence the murmurs of her complicity in Darnley's death, and to secure her rule. Many believed she needed a strong husband, a man who could command respect and help her navigate the treacherous waters of Scottish politics. Enter Bothwell again, bolder than ever. Just days after his acquittal, he gathered a number of leading Scottish nobles at Ainsley Tavern and pressured them into signing a bond known as the Ainsley Bond. This document declared Bothwell innocent of Darnley's murder and, astonishingly, recommended him as a suitable husband for the Queen. It was an audacious move, practically a declaration of intent, and it sent shockwaves through the court. The audacity of a man so recently accused of regicide, now proposing to marry the Queen, was almost beyond belief. The next critical act in this unfolding drama occurred on April 24th, 1567. Mary, returning from a visit to her infant son James at Stirling Castle, was intercepted by Bothwell and a force of 800 men near Edinburgh. She was taken to Dunbar Castle, a powerful stronghold on the coast, controlled by Bothwell. What happened there remains a subject of intense historical debate. Was Mary genuinely abducted, a helpless victim of Bothwell's ambition and force? Or was this a carefully orchestrated event, a staged kidnapping designed to give Mary an excuse for her upcoming actions to protect her reputation in the eyes of a disapproving public and skeptical foreign powers? No matter the truth, the perception was clear. The Queen had been carried off by a man widely believed to be her husband's killer. It was an act of breathtaking insolence and public defiance. In Dunbar Castle, Mary remained for 10 days during this time. Bothwell convinced her to marry him. The details are shrouded in secrecy and speculation. Some accounts suggest he threatened her, perhaps even assaulted her, to compel her consent. Other interpretations propose that Mary, cornered and perhaps desperate for a strong ally and a protector in a world where she felt increasingly isolated, saw this as her only viable path forward. The union, if it came to pass, would be deeply controversial, but it would also unite her with the strongest military power in Scotland, a man devoted to her, whatever his methods. On May 6th, Mary returned to Edinburgh, ostensibly with Bothwell as her captor, but soon after she publicly declared her intention to marry him. The speed of her decision, and the choice of a man so recently cleared of such a heinous crime, stunned everyone. The nobility, many of whom had grudgingly signed the Ainsley bond under duress, were horrified. Protestant clergy were outraged, seeing it as a scandalous and immoral union. Europe watched in disbelief. How could a queen, a Catholic one at that, marry a Protestant and a man accused of such a monstrous act? The very idea was an affront to divine order and royal dignity. The marriage itself took place on May 15, 1567, just 3 months after Darnley's death. It was a private ceremony at Holyrood Palace, conducted according to Protestant rites, a further slap in the face to her Catholic supporters. Mary appeared in public in humble attire, a stark contrast to her usual royal splendor, perhaps a subtle acknowledgement of the controversy surrounding the union. Bothwell, meanwhile, was created Duke of Orkney and Shetland, a title meant to elevate him to a status more befitting a queen's husband, though it did little to quell the outrage. The act of marrying the Earl of Bothwell, the man so widely implicated in Darnley's murder, was a bold, unprecedented step for a queen. It was an elopement of defiance, a desperate attempt to seize control of her own destiny, even if it meant sacrificing her reputation and incurring the wrath of her own people. The immediate aftermath was catastrophic for Mary. The Scottish nobility, led by the same lords who had been her strongest supporters, rose in rebellion. They formed a confederacy and declared their intention to rescue the Queen from Bothwell's influence and bring justice for Darnley's murder. The common people, too, were alienated. Public opinion turned sharply against her. The marriage, intended to stabilize her reign, instead ignited a civil war. Barely a month after her wedding, Mary and Bothwell confronted the Confederate lords at Carbery Hill. Bothwell fled, abandoning the Queen, and Mary surrendered. She was imprisoned in Loch Leven Castle, where she was soon forced to abdicate in favor of her infant son, James VI. Her scandalous, unexpected marriage to Bothwell ultimately led directly to her downfall, and eventually to her long imprisonment and execution in England decades later. It was a desperate gamble for love or power that cost a queen her throne. Number 6. Henry VIII of England and Anne Boleyn. The year is 1533, and the English court is a place of simmering tension, political maneuvering, and a king's desperate desire for a male heir. King Henry VIII had been married to Catherine of Aragon for over 20 years, a union that had produced one surviving child, a daughter named Mary. But Henry was convinced his marriage was cursed, forbidden by God because Catherine had first been married to his deceased elder brother, Arthur. He desperately needed a son to secure the Tudor dynasty and avoid another war of the Roses. His attention had increasingly turned to Anne Boleyn, a lady-in-waiting at court, a woman of sharp wit, intelligence, and an independent spirit that captivated the king. Anne, however, refused to become his mistress, insisting on marriage. This put Henry in an impossible position. How could he marry Anne when he was already married to Catherine, and the Pope steadfastly refused to grant an annulment? The idea of a king of England attempting to annul his long-standing marriage to a princess of Spain, a powerful Catholic nation, was itself shocking. To then secretly marry another woman, defying the very authority of the Pope, was an act of unprecedented audacity. For years, Henry had pursued his great matter, seeking papal approval for his annulment, sending envoys, pleading, even threatening. Catherine, supported by her nephew, the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, remained steadfast, and the Pope, Clement VII, was caught between the most powerful rulers in Europe. Henry's frustration grew into an obsession, and his love for Anne deepened. He had gone to extraordinary lengths, shattering centuries of tradition and risking his kingdom's standing in the Catholic world, all for a new queen and the hope of a son. The stage for their secret marriage was set amidst a flurry of clandestine maneuvers. Thomas Cranmer, a chaplain favored by Anne's family and a staunch advocate for the annulment, was appointed Archbishop of Canterbury in late 1532. This was a critical step, as it placed a sympathetic figure at the head of the English Church, potentially allowing Henry to bypass Rome entirely. The exact date of Henry and Anne's secret wedding has been debated by historians for centuries, adding to the mystique of its unexpected nature. Most accounts point to January 25th, 1533, a cold winter morning. The location was likely a private chapel within the Palace of Whitehall in London, or possibly a secluded chamber in one of the royal residences. The secrecy was paramount. The news of their union, if it became public prematurely, could ignite a political firestorm, provoke international outrage, and even threaten Henry's throne. Only a handful of trusted individuals were present at the clandestine ceremony. Among them were probably Cranmer himself, as well as Henry Norris and Francis Weston, two of the king's close companions, and perhaps Anne's sister, Mary Boleyn. The vows exchanged that day were quiet, whispered almost, but they carried the weight of a revolution. This was not a grand state wedding, but a desperate, audacious act of defiance, a king eloping with his chosen bride from the confines of papal authority and the strictures of canon law. For Anne, it was the culmination of years of patient, unwavering resolve. She had risked everything, her reputation, her safety, even her life to secure this ultimate prize, the crown of England. For Henry, it was a gamble of epic proportions, a defiance of the entire Catholic world. He was literally betting his kingdom on this secret union, on the hope that this new marriage would bring him the longed-for male heir and legitimize his radical break from Rome. The news of Anne's pregnancy, which became undeniable in the spring of 1533, forced Henry's hand. The secret marriage could no longer remain hidden. On April 11, 1533, Archbishop Cranmer formally declared Henry's marriage to Catherine of Aragon null and void. A few days later, on May 28th, Cranmer pronounced Henry's marriage to Anne Boleyn valid. These declarations were made not by the Pope, but by the highest authority of the English Church, effectively establishing the independence of the Church of England from Rome. This act was not just a legal maneuver, it was a profound shift in the political and religious landscape of Europe. On June 1st, 1533, Anne Boleyn was crowned Queen of England in a lavish ceremony at Westminster Abbey. The spectacle was magnificent, but the public reaction was decidedly mixed. While some celebrated the new queen, many still harbored loyalty to Catherine and viewed Anne as an usurper, a harlot who had stolen the king from his rightful wife. Foreign powers, particularly Spain and the Holy Roman Empire, were outraged. Pope excommunicated Henry, and England found itself increasingly isolated on the European stage. The secret elopement had become a public declaration, a political earthquake that reverberated across the continent. The consequences were immediate and far-reaching. England embarked on a path of religious reform, separating from Rome and establishing the Church of England, with the king as its supreme head. Loyalties were tested, and many who refused to acknowledge the new order, like the brilliant Sir Thomas More, paid the ultimate price. For Henry and Anne, their audacious gamble seemed to pay off initially. On September 7th, 1533, Anne gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth, who would one day become one of England's most celebrated monarchs. But Henry's desire for a son remained unfulfilled, and the pressures on Anne would eventually lead to her own tragic end. Yet, their secret marriage, born of desperation and defiance, stands as one of the most unexpected and politically charged elopements in history, changing the course of a nation forever. Number 5. Edward IV of England and Elizabeth Woodville. The year is 1464, and England is still reeling from the bitter War of the Roses, a brutal dynastic struggle between the houses of York and Lancaster for the throne. Edward IV, a monarch and handsome young king, was the first Yorkist monarch to claim the crown. He had won the throne by force, defeating the Lancastrians at the Battle of Towton, one of the bloodiest battles in English history. With the Lancastrian King Henry VI deposed and imprisoned, Edward was attempting to consolidate his power and bring stability to a fractured kingdom. As a powerful young monarch, it was expected that Edward would make a strategic marriage, forging an alliance with a powerful European kingdom, perhaps France or Spain, to secure peace and strengthen England's position on the international stage. His chief advisor, Richard Neville, the Earl of Warwick, known as the Kingmaker for his immense influence and military might, was actively pursuing such a match. Warwick was negotiating with France for a marriage between Edward and Bona of Savoy, sister-in-law to King Louis XI of France. This was considered the perfect match, a powerful alliance that would bring diplomatic stability and prestige. The idea that Edward would marry anyone other than a foreign princess, chosen for political advantage, was unthinkable. The very notion of a king marrying for love, especially to someone considered unsuitable, would have been seen as an act of immense folly and political suicide. Royal marriages were not personal affairs. They were matters of state, carefully arranged to benefit the kingdom. For Edward to defy these expectations would be an act of breathtaking audacity, an elopement not from a physical location, but from the stringent rules of dynastic politics. He was about to shock his entire court, his most powerful noble and the waiting European powers, with a decision that no one, absolutely no one, could have predicted. Elizabeth Woodville, a beautiful, intelligent, and ambitious woman, was an unlikely candidate for a queen. She was not a foreign princess, nor was she from one of England's most powerful noble families. She was a commoner by royal standards, a widow with 2 young sons, and perhaps most damningly, she came from a family with Lancastrian sympathies. Her first husband, Sir John Grey of Groby, had died fighting for the Lancastrian cause at the Second Battle of St. Albans. Elizabeth's family, the Woodvilles, were respectable gentry, but they held little land or power compared to the great magnates of the realm. Edward had first encountered Elizabeth when she petitioned him for the return of her deceased husband's lands, which had been confiscated by the crown. Her beauty and grace immediately captivated the king, who was known for his roving eye and numerous mistresses. But for a king to truly fall in love with, and then desire to marry, such a woman was scandalous in itself. King and Elizabeth Woodville entered into a secret marriage on May 1st, 1464. The ceremony was conducted with the utmost secrecy in a small private chapel at Grafton Regis in Northamptonshire, the Woodville family home. Only a handful of people were present: Edward and Elizabeth, Elizabeth's mother, Jacquetta, Duchess of Bedford, and a priest. The vows were exchanged without fanfare, without the usual pomp and circumstance of a royal wedding. The very simplicity of the ceremony, in contrast to the elaborate state marriages that were expected, underscored the unexpected and clandestine nature of their union. For Edward, it was a profound act of personal will, a defiant declaration that he would marry for love despite all political and social pressures. For Elizabeth, it was an astonishing elevation, a rapid ascent from obscurity to the pinnacle of power, achieved not through dynastic alliance, but through the king's personal affections. The news of the king's secret marriage was kept hidden for several months. Warwick, still diligently negotiating for Edward's hand in France, was completely unaware of the king's true intentions. He continued to discuss the terms of a French alliance, confident that his plan for a strategic royal marriage was progressing smoothly. Tension must have been immense for Edward and Elizabeth. Keeping such a momentous secret from the most powerful man in England, the reveal was carefully orchestrated. In September 1464, at a council meeting at Reading Abbey, Edward finally broke the news to his stunned court. The reaction was one of utter disbelief and immediate outrage. Warwick, who had been tirelessly working to secure the French alliance, felt personally humiliated and betrayed. His carefully laid plans had been utterly shattered by the king's impulsive, romantic, and profoundly unstrategic decision. Consequences of this unexpected elopement were immediate and far-reaching. Warwick, the kingmaker, felt his authority undermined and his loyalty questioned. He had staked his reputation on arranging a foreign marriage for Edward, and now the king had defied him publicly and decisively. This initial resentment festered and grew, eventually leading to a complete rupture between the two men. Warwick, feeling scorned and his power challenged by the rise of the Woodville family, who now held unprecedented influence at court, eventually turned against Edward. He allied himself with Edward's disgruntled brother, George, Duke of Clarence, and even with the deposed Lancastrian queen, Margaret of Anjou. Kingdom was plunged back into civil war, largely as a direct consequence of Edward's secret marriage. The marriage also caused intense friction within the court and among the English nobility. The sudden elevation of the Woodville family, who were quickly granted lands, titles, and prestigious marriages, caused widespread resentment among the established aristocracy. These newly powerful Woodvilles were seen as upstarts, a threat to the traditional balance of power. The unexpected union, born of Edward's desire for love, became a catalyst for renewed conflict and instability in England. Edward IV's secret marriage to Elizabeth Woodville was a profound act of personal defiance against the rigid expectations of medieval royalty, a surprising elopement of the heart that cost a kingdom its fragile peace and changed the course of the War of the Roses, setting in motion events that would eventually lead to the brief return of Henry VI to the throne and further bloodshed. Number 4. Catherine of Valois and Owen Tudor. The year is approximately the 1420s or early 1430s, and the English court is a place of mourning and political uncertainty. Catherine of Valois, daughter of the King of France, had been Queen of England as the wife of the legendary warrior king Henry V. Their marriage was a strategic alliance, forging a temporary peace between warring nations, and had produced a son, the future Henry VI. But Henry V died tragically young in 1422, leaving Catherine a widow at just 21 years old. Her infant son was now king, and Catherine, as Queen Dowager and mother of the monarch, held a unique and delicate position. As a young, attractive, and fertile widow, her potential remarriage was a matter of intense national concern. Any new husband would gain immense prestige and influence, and the English nobility would be extremely wary of anyone who might challenge the young king's authority or divert royal resources. The idea of a queen dowager mother of the ruling king marrying at all was controversial, but for her to marry a man of distinctly lower social standing was simply unthinkable. Royal women were instruments of state policy, their unions always arranged for political advantage. For Catherine to choose a husband for love, and particularly a commoner, would have been an unprecedented defiance of social hierarchy and royal expectations. Such an act would not only be a personal scandal, but a political nightmare, potentially jeopardizing the very stability of the crown. English Parliament, ever cautious, had even passed an act in 1427 to 1428, specifically requiring royal consent for the marriage of a queen dowager. This act, though sometimes debated by historians as to whether it applied retrospectively, certainly reflected the prevailing sentiment. A queen's marriage was too important to be left to personal preference. Owen Tudor, the man who captured the queen's heart, was a stark contrast to her royal status. He was a Welsh squire, a man of humble origins with no great lands or titles. He was a member of the royal household, perhaps serving as keeper of the wardrobe or a minor attendant, and was known for his good looks, charm, and strength. The exact circumstances of their meeting are lost to history, but it is believed that Owen caught the queen's eye during the period of her widowhood, perhaps at royal feasts or tournaments where his physical prowess might have been on display. The stark difference in their social standing made any romantic connection, let alone a marriage, seem utterly impossible. Yet love, or perhaps a desire for companionship and a sense of personal freedom, transcended these rigid social boundaries. The marriage between Catherine of Valois and Owen Tudor was one of the most unexpected and intensely secret unions in English history. There are no official records, no lavish ceremonies, no public pronouncements. The exact date remains unknown, but it is believed to have taken place sometime between 1422 and 1432, likely in the latter half of that period. The location was undoubtedly secluded, perhaps at her manor of Havering Atte Bower in Essex, or another private residence, far from the prying eyes of the court and the ever-watchful gaze of the king's council. The secrecy was absolute, a vital necessity to protect Catherine from censure and Owen from potential punishment for daring to marry a queen. Only a few trusted individuals would have been privy to their vows, perhaps a sympathetic priest and a handful of loyal servants. This was not a power play or a strategic alliance. It was a deeply personal act of defiance, an elopement from the gilded cage of royal widowhood and the relentless expectations of the English political establishment. Despite their best efforts, the secret could not be kept forever, especially once children began to arrive. Catherine and Owen had at least 3, possibly 4 sons who survived to adulthood, and at least one daughter who died in infancy. Their eldest son, Edmund, would later become the Earl of Richmond and father to the future King Henry VII. The existence of these children, and perhaps whispers at court, eventually brought the clandestine union to light. The English council, governing in the young King Henry VI's name, was deeply alarmed. This unexpected marriage, and the children it produced, represented a direct challenge to the legitimacy of the royal line and the authority of the Regency Council. The idea of the king's half-brothers born of such an unsuitable union, existing at court, was a profound threat to the delicate balance of power. The consequences for Catherine and Owen were severe, though not immediate. In 1436, when the secret of their children became known, the council acted. Owen Tudor was arrested and imprisoned, first in Newgate Prison, then later at Windsor Castle. He managed to escape, only to be recaptured. Catherine herself was removed from court and confined to Bermondsey Abbey, where she died in 1437, likely from illness, just a few years after her marriage came to light. Her death spared her from further public censure, but the council took steps to secure her children, placing them under the care of trusted guardians. The union was never officially recognized as valid by the English crown during Catherine's lifetime, and their children were initially regarded as illegitimate. However, the unexpected consequences of this secret elopement would resonate for decades to come. Despite their initial illegitimacy, the children of Catherine and Owen Tudor, particularly Edmund and Jasper, would play a crucial role in the future of England. Edmund Tudor's marriage to Margaret Beaufort, a descendant of the Lancastrian line, provided a powerful claim to the throne. When the War of the Roses finally reached its bloody climax, it was Edmund's son, Henry Tudor, who would defeat Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth Field in 1485, ending the Plantagenet dynasty and establishing the Tudor dynasty. The secret, unexpected marriage of a queen dowager and a Welsh squire, an elopement of love and defiance, laid the very foundation for one of England's most famous and enduring royal houses. It was a union that, against all odds and expectations, changed the entire course of English history. Number 3. Robert II of Scotland and Elizabeth Mure. The year is around 1346, and Scotland is a kingdom struggling for stability and legitimate succession. The reigning monarch, King David II, was the son of the legendary Robert the Bruce. However, David's reign was troubled. He had spent years in English captivity, and his claim to the throne was constantly challenged. His marriage to Joan of the Tower, sister of King Edward III of England, was childless. As David's health declined and the prospect of an heir seemed increasingly unlikely, the focus turned to the succession. The heir presumptive to the Scottish throne was Robert Stewart, the High Steward of Scotland, a grandson of Robert the Bruce through his daughter, Marjorie. Robert Stewart was a powerful magnate in his own right, a skilled military leader, and a shrewd politician who had served as regent during David's captivity. His legitimacy as heir was crucial for the stability of the Scottish crown. The idea that the heir to the Scottish throne, a man destined to become king, would choose to marry a commoner, a woman without noble blood or significant political connections, was highly unorthodox and, in the eyes of the Scottish nobility, potentially disastrous. Royal marriages were strategic alliances designed to secure political support, expand territorial influence, or bring in wealth. To marry outside the established noble families was to invite criticism, challenge legitimacy, and potentially alienate powerful allies. Such a union would be seen as a personal indulgence that risked the stability of the entire kingdom. Robert Stewart was expected to marry a high-born noblewoman, someone whose family could bring power and influence to the future king. Elizabeth Mure was a woman of good family but not of the highest aristocracy. She was the daughter of Sir Adam Mure of Rowland, a minor knight from Ayrshire. Her family held respectable lands and had a good reputation, but they were far from the powerful earls and dukes who populated the upper echelons of Scottish society. Despite her comparatively humble origins, Elizabeth was described as beautiful and virtuous, and she clearly captured the affections of the future king. Precise circumstances of their meeting are not well documented, but it is plausible they met through social gatherings or during Robert's military campaigns. For a man in Robert's position to be drawn to a woman not for her political connections or her dowry, but for her personal qualities, was a testament to a deeply personal and unconventional choice. The relationship between Robert Stewart and Elizabeth Mure began as a clandestine affair, a secret love that led to the birth of several children out of wedlock. They had a significant number of children, including John, who would later become King Robert III, Robert, Duke of Albany, and Alexander, Earl of Buchan, known as the Wolf of Badenoch. The very existence of these children, born before any formal marriage, made the eventual union even more unexpected and fraught with complications. The legitimacy of children born out of wedlock was a major concern in medieval society, especially when it came to royal succession. To then legitimize them through a subsequent marriage, a process that required specific actions and even papal dispensation, was an extraordinary step. The elopement in this case was not a dramatic dash across the countryside, but a quiet, intensely private marriage ceremony that occurred around 1346. The precise details of their wedding are lost to history, a testament to its discreet nature. It likely took place in a secluded location, with only a few trusted witnesses, far from the scrutiny of the royal court and the disapproving eyes of the Scottish nobility. The decision to marry Elizabeth, despite the social implications and the shadow of their pre-existing children, was an act of profound personal commitment on Robert's part. It was an elopement from the rigid expectations of dynastic duty, a choice of personal affection over political expediency. Robert recognized the need to legitimize his children, not just for their sake, but for the future stability of the Stuart line. However, the unexpected nature of this marriage and the premarital births of their children created significant legal and political challenges. Despite the marriage, the legitimacy of their offspring remained a source of contention within the Scottish legal and ecclesiastical systems. To fully secure their children's right to inherit, Robert and Elizabeth sought and obtained a papal dispensation. This was granted by Pope Innocent VI in 1349. The dispensation formally legitimized their children, declaring them legitimate for all purposes, including succession to the throne. This was a crucial step, but it underscored the irregularities of their union. It was an acknowledgement that their initial pairing was unconventional and required special intervention to rectify. Consequences of this unexpected elopement and subsequent legitimization would reverberate for decades. When King David II finally died without an heir in 1371, Robert Stuart ascended to the throne as Robert II, the first monarch of the Stuart dynasty. His marriage to Elizabeth Mure meant that all his children by her, including his heir John, who would become Robert III, were now considered legitimate heirs to the Scottish crown. This was a monumental outcome for a union that had begun in secrecy and social disparity. However, the questions surrounding the legitimacy of the Stuart line, stemming from the circumstances of Robert and Elizabeth's marriage, would continue to be whispered by rivals and used as political leverage in later years. The unusual beginnings of the Stuart dynasty, founded on a love match that defied social norms, led to a royal line that would rule Scotland for centuries and eventually claim the English throne through James VI. The unexpected elopement of a future king with a commoner and the subsequent legitimization of their children stands as a testament to personal choice carving out a powerful dynastic future. Number 2. King John of England and Isabella of Angouleme. The year is 1200, and King John of England is a monarch increasingly prone to impulsive and self-serving actions. He had been king for a year, having succeeded his revered brother, Richard the Lionheart. John's reign was already marked by unpopularity, accusations of tyrannical behavior, and a desperate need to secure a male heir to the English throne. He had been married to Isabella of Gloucester for over a decade, but their union had produced no children. Recognizing the need for a fertile wife, John sought an annulment from Isabella of Gloucester on grounds of consanguinity. They were distantly related, a common claim used for annulments, which was granted in 1199. With his first marriage dissolved, John was free to seek a new wife, and powerful alliances were being forged across Europe through strategic marriages. The prevailing expectation for a king of England was to marry a high-born princess from a powerful European house, someone who could bring significant dowry, political influence, or territorial claims. King John's former father-in-law, the Count of Angouleme, was negotiating a marriage for his young daughter Isabella with Hugh X of Lusignan, a powerful and influential nobleman in Poitou, a region of France that was highly contested between the English and French crowns. This arranged marriage was a crucial political alliance for the Lusignan family designed to secure their position in a turbulent region. The idea of a king simply snatching a betrothed noblewoman from her fiancé, particularly one as powerful as Hugh of Lusignan, was an act of extreme provocation, a flagrant disregard for established feudal customs and diplomatic norms. It would be an elopement not of romance, but of blatant political opportunism and personal desire, executed with breathtaking arrogance. Isabella of Angouleme was a beautiful and remarkably young woman, likely around 12 or 13 years old at the time. She was already betrothed to Hugh X of Lusignan, a man significantly older than her, a powerful lord who commanded significant influence in Poitou, a region that was part of the English territories in France, but constantly challenged by the French king. John, touring his continental possessions, unexpectedly encountered Isabella during a visit to her father, Aymer Taillefer, Count of Angouleme. Accounts suggest John was immediately captivated by her beauty. He saw in her not only a desirable woman but also a strategic opportunity. Marrying Isabella would allow him to assert greater control over Angouleme, an important county, and perhaps weaken the influence of the Lusignan family, who were often thorns in the side of the English monarchy. The decision to pursue Isabella was swift and decisive, driven by a combination of personal attraction and political calculation. The elopement was not a romantic dash in the night, but a brazen act of royal abduction and defiance. John simply took Isabella, breaking her betrothal to Hugh of Lusignan, and proceeded to marry her himself. The marriage took place on August 24, 1200, in Angouleme, with little fanfare and a notable absence of the usual courtly arrangements. The speed of the union, so soon after his annulment, and the blatant disregard for Isabella's pre-existing betrothal shocked everyone. It was an unexpected, audacious move that demonstrated John's willingness to act on impulse and ignore the diplomatic consequences. For Isabella, a young girl, this was a sudden and dramatic shift in her destiny. From a politically arranged marriage to a powerful regional lord to a marriage with a king known for his unpredictable temperament. It was an elopement forced upon a young woman, driven by a monarch's desire. The immediate consequences of John's unexpected marriage were severe and far-reaching. Hugh X of Lusignan, Isabella's scorned fiancé, was absolutely furious. His honor had been publicly insulted, and his carefully constructed political alliance shattered. He immediately appealed to John's overlord, King Philip II of France, for justice. This was a critical step, as Philip was John's greatest rival, and always keen to exploit any weakness or grievance against the English king. The Lusignans, traditionally vassals of the English crown, now had a powerful reason to shift their allegiance to the French king. Philip II, seizing the opportunity, summoned John to his court to answer the charges brought by the Lusignans. John, refusing to acknowledge Philip's authority over him in this matter, failed to appear. This act of defiance gave Philip the pretext he needed. In 1202, Philip declared, all of John's continental possessions, including Normandy, Anjou, Maine, and Touraine, forfeit. This declaration marked the beginning of a major conflict, leading to the devastating loss of almost all of England's territories in northern France, a profound blow to the prestige and power of the English crown. The elopement had ignited a massive war. His impetuous marriage to Isabella, intended to secure a new queen and perhaps new alliances, instead alienated powerful vassals and provided King Philip with the perfect excuse to launch a full-scale invasion. The loss of Normandy in particular was a monumental defeat that severely diminished England's influence on the continent and forever altered the dueling landscape of Europe. John's reign would be further marred by conflicts with his own barons, leading eventually to the sealing of Magna Carta. His unexpected marriage, born of personal desire and political calculation, was an act of breathtaking arrogance that backfired spectacularly, contributing directly to the unraveling of his reign and the loss of a vast empire. It was an elopement that cost the king his continental territories and cemented his reputation as one of England's most disastrous monarchs. Number 1. Heloise and Peter Abelard. The year is approximately 1118, and Paris is the intellectual capital of Europe. Its schools and monasteries hum with vibrant scholarly debate, attracting students from across the continent. At the center of this intellectual ferment stands Peter Abelard, one of the most brilliant and controversial philosophers and theologians of his age. Abelard was a rock star of the medieval academic world, a monodic lecturer whose lectures drew thousands. He was known for his sharp intellect, his dialectical skill, and his willingness to challenge established doctrines, often to the irritation of his more traditional colleagues. He was a cleric, though not yet in holy orders that would absolutely forbid marriage. His position as a respected, albeit provocative scholar meant he was expected to uphold certain standards of moral conduct, even if he did not yet have monastic vows. The idea that a renowned scholar and cleric, whose life was dedicated to intellectual pursuits and who was expected to live a life of celibacy, would engage in a passionate affair, let alone a secret marriage, was unthinkable. Such an act would not only be a profound betrayal of his academic and religious calling, but also a shocking scandal that could destroy his reputation and career. Scholars were held to a high moral standard, and a marriage, especially a secret one, would compromise his intellectual integrity and standing within the church. For Abelard, to elope with a student, a young woman under his tutelage, would be an act of breathtaking recklessness, a profound defiance of societal norms, academic expectations, and clerical codes of conduct. Heloise was a young woman of exceptional intelligence, renowned for her profound knowledge of Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, a rare achievement for a woman of her time. She was the niece of Fulbert, a canon at Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, and lived under his guardianship. Her uncle, proud of her intellect, sought out the best possible education for her. He invited Abelard, the celebrated master, to live in his household and tutor Heloise privately. This arrangement, while seemingly innocent, placed the brilliant philosopher and his equally brilliant student in dangerously close proximity. Heloise was not just a student. She was a receptive, eager mind who matched Abelard's intellect, and their shared passion for learning quickly blossomed into a deeper, illicit connection. The intellectual mentorship transformed into a passionate, forbidden love affair. The relationship between Heloise and Abelard escalated quickly. Despite the profound risks to Abelard's career and reputation, they became lovers. Heloise conceived a child. The news of her pregnancy, if it became public, would be a catastrophic scandal for both of them, exposing their secret and condemning Abelard for breaking his clerical vows. To avoid public disgrace and to protect Heloise and their unborn child, they decided upon a secret marriage. The elopement was a quiet, desperate attempt to legitimize their relationship and their child in the eyes of God, if not yet in the eyes of the world. It took place in the utmost secrecy, with only a few witnesses present and likely in a private location, far from the prying eyes of the Parisian intellectual community and the watchful gaze of Canon Fulbert. This clandestine union, a desperate leap into the unknown, was intended to preserve some semblance of honor and to protect their future together. Heloise gave birth to a son whom she named Astrolabe. To further protect their secret, and to ensure the child's safety, Astrolabe was sent away to be raised by Abelard's sister in Brittany. Despite the secret marriage and the removal of their child, the rumors of their affair persisted and grew. Canon Fulbert, Heloise's uncle, was eventually enraged by the betrayal and the public humiliation he felt. He believed Abelard had seduced his niece and then abandoned her, even though the secret marriage had occurred. Fulbert, feeling dishonored and disgraced, sought revenge. Consequences of their unexpected elopement were swift and brutal. Fulbert, in a desperate act of vengeance, hired a group of men who one night broke into Abelard's lodging. They castrated him. A horrific act that not only inflicted terrible physical pain, but also rendered him unable to pursue his clerical career, which required celibacy. This mutilation, a shocking and barbaric punishment in medieval times, was meant to forever end Abelard's ability to engage in relationships and to publicly disgrace him. The news of the attack sent shockwaves through the academic world and beyond, making the scandal public in the most horrifying way possible. Following the mutilation, Abelard, in despair and shame, became a monk at the Abbey of Saint Denis. He encouraged Heloise to also take vows, and she reluctantly became a nun at the convent of Argenteuil. Their secret marriage, intended to legitimize their love and their child, ultimately led to their forced separation and a life of monastic seclusion. Their story, however, did not end there. They would continue to correspond for years, writing a series of poignant and deeply personal letters that reveal the enduring strength of their love, their intellectual connection, and the profound tragedy of their fate. These letters, which were later collected and widely circulated, became one of the most famous and heartbreaking love stories of the Middle Ages. The unexpected elopement of Heloise and Abelard, born of forbidden love and intellectual passion, led to a public scandal and personal tragedy, yet it also created a literary legacy that has captivated hearts for centuries.